Lately, the ACG has been revealing a lot of cards from Burst of Destiny, including the latest archetype of the Dogmatica lore. I've heard people pronounce it as Xiangjian, so I'm gonna go with that. They're a Wyrms synchro archetype, with a neat little twist. They don't actually have any tuners. Instead, their monsters create a token that's also a tuner, and so then they just synchro summon themselves as the tuner they just created. Luckily, to avoid a repeat of any Hulky 5-back shenanigans, you can't summon anything but synchros while that token's on the field. By their own merits, they seem like a very strong archetype already, but in this video I'm going to look at them specifically in relation to Tenyis, who desperately do need a buff. Since most of their effects work with Wyrms, they actually have a decent amount of synergy with Tenyi, but what makes them work exceptionally well is that Tenyi don't actually use their normal summon in most of their combos, so everything that the new archetype adds to them is essentially completely free, just bonus on top of what Tenyis would do already. I'll get into combos soon, but first I'll go over the new cards that actually work well with Tenyi. First of all is Mare Mare, a level 4 water worm. When it's normal summoned, you can reveal a Xiangjian card, or any worm in your hand, to special summon a level 4 token tuner. Like I said before, the token restricts you into just synchros, but only while it's on the field, so I won't mention it every time, but just keep that in mind for your combos. As a bonus, when it's used as synchro material, you just get to draw a card. The second starter is Tyre. You can banish a Xiangjian card or a worm monster from your graveyard to again special summon the same token. When it's sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, you just get to Foolish Berry any worm from your deck. Now anyone who's played Tenyis knows that there's a specific worm that you really need to get in the graveyard for all of their combos to work properly. And that's Mare Mare. Now you do have a few ways already of getting that in your graveyard, but thanks to this, it's so much more consistent, so it makes you even more likely to be able to do the Tenyi full combo. Since both Mare Mare and Tyre are level 4 monsters, you can just use your normal summon for them, create the token, then make a level 8 synchro with them, after having done what you'd normally do with your hand full of Tenyi. However, if you didn't draw them, they also have a search card. It allows you to add a Xiangjian monster from your deck to your hand, but if you control a synchro monster, you can just add any worm instead. You can use this just to find their starter cards if you didn't happen to draw any and only have Tenyi in your hands, but if you do have one of the level 4s and you can just make a synchro, this can instead search something like Mare Mare, which you can then just discard to get into the graveyard. But what's the payoff of being able to make a level 8 synchro monster in Tenyi? Well, you can of course just make Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. It's a Tenyi monster, so you don't get locked out of its effects if you have to use Shaman of the Tenyi to summon it, and its non-targeting banish is a fairly decent effect, as well as its fairly decent OTK power if you're going second. But with this new archetype, you actually have a much better option. Xiao, the Xiangjian Grand Swordmaster, is a level 8 synchro that needs a worm as a non-tuner. You have to choose between both of these effects, so that will probably depend on if you're going first or second. Its second effect is that you can banish one of your worms from your hand or graveyard to target another effect monster on the field and negate its effects until the end of the turn. If you're going first, you can add to your hand or banish any Xiangjian card from your deck, and then when it's your opponent's turn, you also get a quick effect negate of one of their monsters. This is just bonus for Tenyi since it doesn't interfere with their normal combo at all, so it's essentially just a free negate on top of all the consistency they add. Both adding to your hand or banishing can actually be useful depending on the situation and what else you have in your hand. For example, if you really need a token on your field to activate Tenyi effects that require a normal monster, you could banish Xiangjian Sudden Shift, which is a trap that, when banished, special summons one of their level 4 synchro tokens to the field. More often than not though, if you're going first, you could just add this trap to your hand, then it's fairly easy to be able to destroy one of your worm tokens to destroy 2 of your opponent's cards. Another option is to just add their search spell to your hand. Since you're bound to control a synchro monster by that point, you can just search any worm, which includes Mare Mare to discard with Shaman of the Tenyi, or it can include the last main deck card that I'd recommend using in Tenyi. This is a level 6 worm, which lets you discard another Xiangjian card or any worm monster to special summon itself, and then summon their level 4 token. As a small bonus, you get to inflict 1200 burn to your opponent if you use it as a synchro material. With this card and the token it creates, you can use their level 10 synchro, Xiangjian. This huge boss monster gains 100 attack and defense for every banished card, and makes your opponents lose 100 attack and defense for every banished card. That's yours and your opponent's. Obviously we play Pot of Desires in this deck. It's good in general, but also you gain 2000 attack difference thanks to it. If it would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish a card from your graveyard instead, and that's not once per turn, so you can keep protecting it. And finally, you get a non-targeting banish of a card on your opponent's field and in their graveyard. That is a hard once per turn, of course. And that's so easy to trigger in this deck, since so many Tenyis banish themselves from the graveyard to activate their effects. If you manage to make Xiangjian and a Swordmaster while going first, it means that you'll get a quick effect negate that banishes a card from your graveyard, so you can then immediately also banish a card from their field and graveyard. On top of whatever Tenyis were doing already, of course. But of course, something you need to keep into account with any deck is how consistent it actually is. What's great about running this as Tenyis Day is that it's actually super consistent. Now before I go over the deck itself, we're going to go into BODE Pro for a bit, so that I can actually show some combos that you can do with this deck. For these first two combos, I'm going to show what you can do with Mare Mare in your hand. I'm also using Ashina, but you can usually replace Ashina by just having two different Tenyis in your hand instead, or any of the cards that search Ashina. It's fairly flexible. The other three cards will probably be something that can substitute for Ashina if you don't actually have it in your hand. You start by summoning Ashina with its own effect, since you control no effect monsters, then link it into Monk of the Tenyi. You then banish it to summon Adhara. Adhara is useful for Mare Mare combos, since Mare Mare needs you to reveal a worm in your hand, and Adhara adds one of your banished Tenyi back to your hand when it banishes itself, meaning that you will have something to reveal for her effect. You then link it into a Monk instead of going straight into the Link 2, because you need to control no effect monsters to use its effect, which you then do, banishing itself to add back Adhara to your hand. You then use your normal summon on Mare Mare, which reveals Adhara, to create a token. You synchro summon them into the Swordsmaster, and then get a draw as Mare Mare. With the Swordmaster, you get to search a card, and here we'll search the Dragon Sword appears, which is their search card. With that, you can search Mare Mare, and then we link into the Shaman, who discards Mare Mare to then summon Mare Mare. Mare Mare creates tokens, reducing its level along the way, and then you link them into the Tenyi Link 4. You can then link 2 more tokens into another Shaman of the Tenyi. As soon as your opponent special summons a monster, you can use Sahasrara's effect to create a token, which will not only protect your other effect monsters, but also mean that if they try to attack them, Shaman of the Tenyi's effect can destroy something on their field. You also have a quick effect negate with the Swordsmaster. The second replay shows what happens if you do have Mare Mare in your hand, or a way to get it to the graveyard, besides using the Synchro's effect. You do the combo as usual, but then with the Synchro, instead, you add to your hand Sudden Shift. You then combo just the same as before, creating Mare Mare, creating its tokens, and then making the Link 4, and then you make another Shaman of the Tenyi. Now during your opponent's turn, if the token you create with the Link 4 is endangered at any point, you can just destroy it with your trap to destroy 2 of your opponent's monsters. Now on to Tire combos. You do your combo as usual, up to the point where you have 2 monks on the field and Adhara in the graveyard. You then normal summon Tire, which will banish Adhara to make a token. You then synchro summon the level 8 synchro, and with Tire's effect you send Mare Mare to the graveyard, and then you get to search Sudden Shift. You can then discard any card in order to summon Mare Mare, create all of its tokens, and then make the Link 4 Tenyi. You can then make another Shaman of the Tenyi, set the trap, and have a quick effect negation ready, a destroy 2, protection as soon as they summon something, and a distraction if they try to engage it in battle. You can also go for something else if you have Tire. Summoning Ashina and going into the Monk, you get to summon a Tenyi, and then since you don't actually need the Tenyi's effect, you can just go straight into a Shaman, which saves you a Monk in your extra deck. You then banish the Monk with Tire to summon the token, and then Adhara banishes itself to add back a card to your hand, which is usually Ashina. With Tire, you send Mare Mare again, but with the Swordmaster, you instead search Long Wyrm. Since Adhara returned a banished Tenyi to your hand, you now have a worm in your hand and Long Wyrm. That means you can discard Ashina to summon it, and it will then create a token. With that, you make the level 10 synchro. Get some free burn, and then you can make Mare Mare as usual. What's nice is that you can access the new archetypes engine without actually drawing any of them in your starting hand. This is thanks to Vishuddha being a level 7, and one of your worms being a level 1 tuner. Starting with Ashina, you summon it, link it into a monk, summon Vishuddha, and then banish Ashina to get Adhara. You then make the level 8 and search Tire, and since you haven't normal summoned yet, you can just summon it and banish something to get out a token. You can then add a card back to your hand as well. With those 2, you can make the other level 8, which is Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, and get to send Mare Mare for next turn. It's not the strongest board, You do get a quick effect negate, and you get to banish an opponent's monster that activates an effect. First, your engine will be mostly up and running for next turn, since you'll have a Shuna in your hand and Mare Mare in the graveyard. Finally, I wanted to do this replay as a sort of best case scenario, which involves having a Shuna, Taya, and Mare Mare in your hand. But don't forget, there's lots of flexibility in these combos, since there's a lot of search cards in this deck. You start with a Shuna as usual, getting it into the graveyard, then getting out a Tara. Link a Tara away to get another card back into your hand, and then make Shaman of the Tenyi. Taya banishes the Monk, and goes into the level 8 Synchro. It then Foolish Berries for Shuda, and adds to your hand Long Wan. Now if you didn't have Mare Mare, you would just send Mare Mare of course. But if you're going second, the Shuda is actually really useful for breaking your opponent's board. What you do is you use the level 6 to discard Mare Mare, and then create a token. While you have that token on the field, you can use Vishuda's effect to banish itself to return one of your opponent's monsters to the hand. You then Synchro summon Xiangjian, and do some burn to your opponent. You then bring back Mare Mare, make some tokens, make the level 4 Tenyi, summon another token to make another Shaman of the Tenyi. Going first, as soon as your opponent summons an effect monster, you would get a token out, which protects your effect monsters from being targeted by battle or by any effects. You also get Shaman of the Tenyi, protecting your token from battle, which will destroy one of their cards if they try. You get the Swordsmaster to banish something as a quick effect to negate something on their field, and then Xiangjian will immediately banish something on their field and graveyard at the same time. If you're going second, you get to compulse one of their monsters, destroy something with Shaman of the Tenyi, and then, if you had anything in your graveyard that could banish itself before using Shaman of the Tenyi's effect, you'd also get a banish from the field and graveyard. Since you've burned your opponent for 1200, you also have way over lethal. So now for the actual deck. When it comes to the Tenyi spirits, you run 3 of the light, 3 of the dark, 3 of the fire, and 3 of the earth, and 2 of the wind and water since they're less useful in their effects. You run so many because they're free special summons, and they get your Tenyi engine started by letting you have a normal monster on the field. They're also good discard outlets for the cards that require you to discard or reveal a worm monster. You then run 3 Vessel for the Dragon cycle, which just lets you send a worm from your deck to the graveyard, and if you already have a non-effect monster on the field, search any Tenyi monster with a different name. Usually you'll send Mare Mare as this, which saves you from needing to search it through other means, and then if you started with a less good Tenyi, it lets you also search a Shuna as well, which will make your combos a lot more flexible. You run 1 Heavenly Dragon Circle and 3 Foolish Burial Goods, because its graveyard effect is actually better than its usual effect. If you control a non-effect monster, you get to banish this card from your graveyard to add a Tenyi card from your deck to your hand. So again, that's another way of getting a Shuna if you had any other Tenyi to start with. You then run 3 Pot of Desires, which is fairly good in this deck since everything's a 2 or a 3 of, except Dragon Circle, Sudden Shift, and Long Wan, so just hold off from using it until you've used those cards, if you can. Finally, for the Tenyi side of things, you have run 3 Mare Mare since it's indispensable for combos. You want to either draw this so you can discard it with the Shaman, or send it to the graveyard with Vessel for the Dragon cycle. Since Taya sends it to the graveyard when you Synchro Summon with it, you're so much more likely to actually get to it nowadays. On the Xiangjian side of things, you run 3 Mare and 3 Taya, which are basically the normal summons of this deck since you don't use any other ways. You then run 3 of their Search spell, since it's useful to find them if you don't have a normal summon, but it's also fine to draw if you already have one of them, since then you can use it to search something like Mare Mare or Long Huan, which you play at 1. Finally, you run 1 Sudden Shift, which is just a bit of extra disruption if you're going first, and can destroy 2 of your opponent's cards for very little cost since you make tokens quite easily in this deck. Finally, the extra deck is fairly flexible, besides a few things. You need 3 Monk of the Tenyi, since otherwise you won't be able to start your combos very well. And you want at least one of them to start them again on the next turn. You want at least 2 Shaman of the Tenyi because you often make one, then link it away and then make another one in your Mare Mare combos. You want at least one of the Link 4 since it's what you end on if you've managed to combo properly. And then at least one of the 2 new Synchros, since they add so much power to the deck. Then you're free to run some extra things like a Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, since you can just make it sometimes, or even a Baxia since it's a level 8 Worm Synchro, so there will be times that you can just make it if you've used up your other extra deck slots. Berserker of the Tenyi won't come up very often, but you can make it if you have extra tokens with Mare Mare or something. And Draco Masters of the Tenyi is a good fallback if your combo is interrupted and you can't quite go all the way. For the other spots, just fill them with extra copies of something that you might want, or just fill them with other extra deck monsters you think you might be able to make. Personally, I'm just happy that Tenyi's finally getting some support. This new archetype is going to be incredibly strong on its own merits, but mixing it with Tenyi is actually surprisingly consistent, and can add some protection to their boss monsters. The two engines also run almost independently of each other, so if one gets interrupted, you can usually just go into the other side of things, saving your normal summon for as long as possible, so that you can start making synchros after you're interrupted if you need to. That's it for this deck profile. If you want to see more like this, give it a like and subscribe. I'm planning to go over some more support soon, like the new Reptilian support, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. Other than that, happy dueling!